Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode here. This is going to be a little bit of a rant video or a little bit of just a discussion video, however you want to frame it. I'm not really ranting because I'm not really super angry about anything, but I more wanted to just give a free-flowing conversation thought piece about something that's been kind of circling around my little community with my fellow YouTuber friends who've put out videos about vinyl collecting and how vinyl records have gotten so expensive and what it means to the community at large and to their own collecting habits and things of that nature. And of course, vinyl collecting is something really near and dear to my heart. As you can see with the records behind me and some of my vinyl haul videos, I'm very much a collector and I have a vested interest in music collecting at large and the different formats that it can come in and what it means for me as a consumer. So I wanted to get into all that, so hopefully this isn't too scattered and I can kind of streamline my thoughts a little bit in a way that makes sense. But like I said, this is more just an unscripted, free-flowing thought experiment about what the others have said about this topic and what I think about it myself. So my history, first of all, as a collector, I got obsessed with collecting CDs at a pretty young age, but it really blossomed in high school and further into college. It started with more of like the alternative rock scene at the time when I was in high school. That was the popular music, at least for me. Bands like Incubus, Linkin Park, Nickelback, all of that stuff was what I was first into as a collector and bought those CDs. And really the first CD that really stood out to me was Incubus and their album Morning View. First time I really just loved a full-on album rather than just various singles that I'd hear on the radio or download from the internet. And when I heard progressive rock that my dad showed me, that led me to really care more about albums and really want to find and collect more. And I just started asking for CDs from all the bands I loved and started amassing a collection. And throughout college, I really was obsessed. I would order CDs fairly regularly from various places to be able to give me the prog fix that I needed to get by. And I was really deep into the prog scene at the time, and pretty much any album I heard some kind of buzz about, that was one that was on my list, and I'd order it pretty much without hearing a note of it. I just, based on the reviews that I was reading, based on the description, that if you like this band, you'll like this band kind of thing. So it was just a really exciting time where I would just order CDs constantly, and some would be great surprises, some I wouldn't care for as much. But I was slowly amassing a collection and developing this love for physical media. And, it carried over into my post-college years. But I started to kind of rethink the whole thing once streaming became a big deal, because that kind of reframed the way that I listened to music, where I was mostly listening on my device, and it was a new experience to be able to have access to like pretty much any song I could think of just off the top of my head. And now I could listen to this music before I went out and bought it. Before it was just an experiment, and I may or may not like it when I got the album, but CDs were fairly cheap, so I was willing to take that risk. And most of the time, since I like most things in progressive rock, it was mostly a good risk, and it paid off. But now that I could listen to the releases through streaming, I started to rethink, like, okay, I can be more selective and choosy about the records that I feel like I should own versus the records that are okay just sitting on my streaming service of choice or whatever. And I almost even considered just completely not collecting anymore because it would save me space, and I was really into the streaming side of things. I wasn't really pulling out CDs to listen to them. It was just way more convenient, and I thought it sounded fairly decent to listen to streaming. So I was starting to back away from the collecting aspect and thinking that it might just be easier to just stick with streaming or digital downloads at the very least. But then the vinyl craze kind of happened, and people were starting to really get excited about vinyl and were sharing their vinyl collections on YouTube and all this kind of stuff. And I just got caught up in the hype of this experience and thought it'd be fun to like buy a record player and see what all the hype was about. So I bought a record player, and I bought Testimony by Neil Morse on vinyl, was my very first record. And I just had so much fun with it. It was a new way to experience music. I felt like, even though I was starting to try to embrace streaming, I still felt there was something missing. Like I was losing the soul of the music that I was consuming. Where a record, you get to have this kind of ritual of putting it on the turntable, listening to it all the way through, and really letting the music wash over you, pulling out the sleeve and the artwork and all of the lyrics and all of that stuff, and letting it be more of an experience that you sit and really focus on. Whereas with streaming, I was starting to get into this like perspective of I just put my favorite albums on shuffle just while I was doing other things around the house, or while I was driving, or while I was walking here and there. And it was just losing that specialness that I had with the music. It was starting to just lose that soul that had drawn me to it in the first place, and making me a little bit more casual about listening to music, this hobby that used to be an obsession of mine. So I feel like vinyl was a resurgence for me, for getting back into really loving music and collecting it, having it physically and owning it, having this ritualistic experience of putting records on a physical table, and just having that time with my music again was a really great experience, and caused me to be a little bit obsessed. And I started buying up all my favorite albums all over again. You know, I had them on CD, but now I had to have them on this new format, and I liked having this like display of records that looked really nice in our house, and I was able to just pull my favorites and put them on the turntable and experience this music all over again. It was like being reintroduced to all these favorite records of mine from throughout the past 20 years or whatever. And so I've been continuing to collect ever since, but as my fellow colleagues have been pointing out, it's getting more and more expensive as a hobby. Like when I was first getting records, you know, it wasn't too bad to buy a few records. And, you know, I did feel a little bit bad that it was more than a CD would cost. And like, you know, I am spending slightly more money than I did back in high school and college. But, you know, I felt like I could afford that, and it was worthy to purchase these things, since this is my main hobby and the main way that I spend my income, perhaps. But through the years, it just feels like the prices creep up, and you know, it starts to become unreasonable, so to speak. When I look for an album that I want to purchase, you know, I really like this album, and you know, it's $50, $60. You know, it feels like for just one album to spend that much on it, it's not even like a premium version. It's just a pretty standard edition of the record, and it felt like I was buying into this hype, but not really getting the value out of it that it was worth. And now I've had to become a lot more selective about what records I want to get, because I can't afford to buy everything. You know, my instinct is to want to support and buy every record that I come across, because as you know, if you watch my channel, I love so much music, and I'm always talking about it, and I'm always trying to find the next best record, and really supportive of all these great artists that I've really fallen in love with. But it's just become impossible to be able to buy every record from every album that I enjoy throughout the course of the year. So I have to like really reserve it for those special artists, for those special albums, for things that kind of reach the next level for me, or that are going to be in my top 10 of the year or whatever, rather than just every other release. And of course, I have to like spend time with an album, listening to it on streaming or through a digital version, before I really feel like I can commit to buying the record itself. So it's a whole different process, where before I was willing to kind of buy albums sight unseen, note unheard, just, you know, because of the buzz about it, because I knew the artist and trusted them. But now I just can't really invest in that, because it's just so expensive. And the last thing I want is to spend, you know, $50 on a record and find out after the fact that I just don't care for it that much. And now it's just sitting on my shelf, not being listened to, and I wasted that money essentially. So I try to like have a metric in my own brain of like, okay, is this vinyl worthy? Is this not? And I'm starting to consider like getting back into buying CDs, because they're just so much more affordable than records are, which I transitioned to records because I kind of prefer it as a physical format. Not necessarily for the sound quality, because I'm not really an audiophile and I don't get into the technical aspects of it, but it's more for the ritualistic experience. It's more for the bigger artwork, and for being able to have this to display on my wall behind me, and to really have a physical connection with it. I just think the artwork is so much more satisfying on this bigger sleeve than it is on a smaller CD. But I really love physical collecting. I really love supporting artists and bands and what they're doing, bringing money to them. And so I feel like I still want to support them in some way and buy the album, but I can't really afford these exorbitant vinyl costs. And so my next step is either to buy like just a digital version so they at least get something from it, or buy a CD. Which is something I haven't really done much in the past several years as I've transitioned to purely vinyl. And if I'm being honest with my listening habits, I do put on a record maybe once, twice a week or so. I just don't really have time to just sit and devote that time often to just playing a full record. So most of my music listening throughout the week is done through streaming or through digital means. I have my Apple Music that I have my whole collection within, or that I load up, any promos that I get from different labels and things. And that's what I'm listening to in the car or as I'm at work, or, just puttering around the house. So it felt like, why am I spending so much money towards the vinyl stuff when the majority of my listening is happening on streaming and on these other services? So it's been a tricky balance, because I don't want to completely abandon collecting because I love it so much. And there's nothing better for me than getting a new record, either being able to go to a record store and pick up a handful of new things, or to order them online, pre-order them, and be excited when they come in through the mail, and to have this connection with the artist and with this record, and being able to make it this ritualistic experience, like I mentioned, putting the record on the turntable, devoting my full attention to it rather than just having it on in the background while I'm, doing dishes, or while I'm doing other chores, or while I'm driving, or while I'm doing other stuff. I just really love that experience, treating it like you're sitting down like you would if you're watching a movie. You're not going to like do a million other things while a movie's on that you're really interested in and wanting to soak in. And I think it should be the same with music, that it should be an experience that washes over you. So that's really what it's come down to, because of the high price of vinyl, is I have to really assess every single release that comes out. Like, is this vinyl worthy? Is it not? And I have this like insane complicated system in my own head of like determining how worthy it is. And, it depends on several different factors. There's several different things. When I come across an album I like, it goes into like one of three categories. Either it's something I love with my whole heart and I want to own physically on vinyl. It's worth the cost. I know I'm going to listen to it and cherish it and want to just sit and revel in it. Then there's the next tier where maybe it's not on that level of vinyl worthy, but I still want to support the artist. I still like it enough that I want to collect it. That's where I may consider a CD or even just a digital version just to have it. And if it's in the third tier where it's enjoyable, but it's not like a necessary must-have, I can just have it on my streaming service, listen to it occasionally, and that's okay as well. So I try to diversify and have several different forms to listen to music in, and try to distinguish it that way. And part of my metric when I'm thinking about this is like, if suddenly all the streaming services on earth just suddenly went away, or just like became impossible to subscribe to, or if all the music got dropped that I really loved, would I be devastated to lose that music? That if I'd be devastated to never be able to listen to it again, then I'd love to own it on physical, so that I can have it forever. That's really the perspective I have when it comes to music. Like, I love Neil Morse with my full heart, as everyone knows, and I'd be devastated if I had no way to access his music, if it was taken away from streaming, which is kind of, most of his catalog isn't available on streaming, or you have to buy his specific streaming app of Waterfall. But there's several artists who are starting to take their things away from streaming services because of how badly streaming services pay the artists. So they just want to take their music and sell it on their own and get the better profit from it, which is totally fair and within their rights. And so my thought is, if they're going to be doing that, if more artists are going to be taking their music away from streaming, like, which music would I be devastated to lose access to? That's the kind of music that I should be focusing on buying, either on vinyl or on CD or whatever else. So that's kind of my format and the way that I collect now. And as I prepare for my move and have possibly more limited finances, I try to be even more restrictive in my thinking about what's worthy of buying on vinyl, and trying to just have a vinyl collection that's just the best of the best that's really curated to my specific tastes and not just a catch-all of everything. Because I have fairly expansive taste in music, and there's a lot of things I'd love to have. But you can't have everything, you know? You have to be picky. You have to select and choose, especially with exorbitant vinyl costs. You can't just go out and buy everything anymore. You have to rethink the way that you do vinyl. And it's unfortunate, in my opinion. I wish vinyl was more affordable. I wish it wasn't becoming a hobby that's for people who are rich, for people who can afford these more limited edition, high-cost items. It almost feels like it's become this exclusive club that a lot of people are ruled out from because they don't have the finances to be able to do it. And I just wish it was more inclusive, that it was able to reach a wider audience and wasn't just marketing towards this niche of people that have this niche interest in the first place and then have the funds to be able to fund it. But of course, it's just how business works, right? If people are willing to pay those prices for vinyl, of course, they're going to keep charging those kinds of prices. So it really only changes if the market changes, if people suddenly stop buying vinyl altogether and then they have to reevaluate and reassess what to price vinyl at in order to make the profit. But it seems like at the moment, people are still buying it. People are still interested in vinyl, even at the higher price points. So it's just going to be a thing that continues, I think. Seems like everything in the world is just getting more and more expensive and limiting the scope of who can be involved in it, and it's unfortunate. But it just means I have to be a bit more selective and more thoughtful and try to be smarter about how I collect and not just spend all the money all the time. I have to have a little bit more self-restraint. And it's difficult. It's not the easiest thing to do oftentimes. And sometimes it's really difficult. I'm left oftentimes at this really difficult decision of I would love to have this on vinyl, but can I afford it? Should I wait for something that's going to strike me even harder in the future? Am I going to blow my budget on vinyl now and not have the funds I needed for that really special record that's going to come out in a couple months? Those are the kind of calculations that I wish we didn't have to make. But it just kind of is what it is, That's always my philosophy. Instead of being mad and fighting against it and thinking the world's out to get me, I just kind of deal with things as they are and try to adapt the best I can to this new normal, so to speak, of just how collecting is. You can't just go off and buy a bunch of $15, $20 records anymore. It's just not going to happen. And so I have to adapt to the new marketplace. And we'll see how it proceeds and continues. But I always flirt with those thoughts of with vinyl getting more and more expensive, should I just revert back to being purely in the streaming world or purely digital? Is that a better way to go? It saves space, it saves money, and I still have access to all the music that I want, and it's still very good quality in my opinion. As a non-audio file, I think a decent solid MP3 or even better FLAC file is decent enough for my ears. And so those are the types of things I think about collecting. And I know that's a big wandering amount of stuff that I just said, but hopefully you have some kind of takeaway. I'd love to hear people's thoughts in the comments about this subject. And yeah, it's just something that's near and dear to me and really something I'm very interested in and always constantly thinking about and reframing how I should be collecting and what's smart to do and what isn't, and how to adapt as vinyl prices get more insane, as things become more about limited editions and pre-orders and the specialty stuff on record store day. Sometimes I get a little bit annoyed when everything's a special edition or, the special colored vinyl or stuff. And I love colored vinyl, but, a lot of times I just want the record itself. I just want the album as it stands. I don't need bonus material. I don't need this live album. I don't need, outtakes from the studio. I just want the pure album as it was originally and how they conceived it, and just put that on and enjoy it as the band wanted it to be heard. So that's all I'm about. That's what I'm trying to do with my habits and collecting. So thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, found something interesting out of it, and I'll hopefully catch you guys in future episodes. Bye, everybody.